Detective Smith. What do we have here? Officer Jones. Looks like a murder, sir. Victim's name is John Doe, found dead in his apartment this morning. Detective Smith. Any signs of forced entry? Officer Jones. No, sir. The door was locked from the inside, and the victim's keys were found in his pocket. Detective Smith. Interesting. And the cause of death? Officer Jones. Looks like he was strangled, sir. There are bruises on his neck and signs of a struggle. Detective Smith. And did you find anyone in the apartment? Officer Jones. No, sir. The place was empty when we arrived. We're still canvassing the neighbors, though. Detective Smith. Good. Let's see if we can find anyone who heard or saw anything suspicious. And get forensics in here to process the scene. Later that day, the detectives are interviewing the victim's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. Detective Johnson. Can you tell us if you heard anything unusual last night, Mrs. Thompson? Mrs. Thompson. Well, I did hear some noises coming from Mr. Doe's apartment around midnight. Sounded like someone was moving furniture or something. Detective Smith. Interesting. Did you see anyone coming or going from his apartment? Mrs. Thompson. No, I didn't. But I did see a strange man hanging around the building a few days ago. I thought it was odd, so I took a picture of him with my phone. Detective Johnson. Can we see the picture, please? Mrs. Thompson shows them the picture, and the detectives take note of the man's appearance. Detective Smith. Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. This is very helpful. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. As they leave the building, the detectives discuss their next steps. Detective Johnson. We should track down that man in the photo and see if he has any connection to the victim. Detective Smith. Agreed. And we need to keep interviewing neighbors and anyone else who might have information. We'll catch whoever did this. The detectives continue their investigation by interviewing more potential witnesses and gathering evidence. They discover that the victim had a gambling problem and owed money to several people, including a local loan shark named Tony. Detective Smith. We need to bring in Tony for questioning. He might know something about the victim's death. Detective Johnson. But how are we going to get him to talk? He's not exactly known for being cooperative with the police. Detective Smith. We'll find a way. We need to put pressure on him and make him think it's in his best interest to talk. They arrange to have Tony brought in for questioning and begin to interrogate him. Detective Smith. Tony, we know that John Doe owed you money. Did you have anything to do with his death? Tony. What are you talking about? I didn't kill anyone. Detective Johnson. We have reason to believe that you might have been involved. You wouldn't want to be associated with a murder, would you? Tony. I don't know anything about it, I swear. I just loaned him some money, that's all. Detective Smith. We have evidence that suggests otherwise, Tony. You had motive and opportunity. It would be in your best interest to tell us everything you know. Tony. All right. I did go to see him last night. He owed me a lot of money, and I wanted to collect. But when I got there, he was already dead. Detective Johnson. And what did you do then? Tony. I panicked, okay? I didn't want to be implicated. I just left and hoped no one would find out. Detective Smith. Thank you for your cooperation, Tony. We'll be in touch if we have any more questions. As they leave the interrogation room, the detectives discuss what they've learned. Detective Johnson. So Tony didn't actually kill him, but he was there on the night of the murder. And he had a motive for wanting him dead. Detective Smith. Right. We need to keep digging and find out who else might have had a reason to kill John Doe. And we need to figure out how Tony fits into this whole thing. The episode ends with the detectives feeling like they're getting closer to solving the case, but still with many unanswered questions. The detectives decide to visit the victim's workplace, a local factory, to interview his coworkers and see if they know anything about his personal life. Detective Smith. Excuse me, we're looking for anyone who might have worked with John Doe. Can you tell us if you knew him? Coworker. Yeah, I knew him. He was a quiet guy, kept to himself mostly. But he was a hard worker. Detective Johnson. Did he ever mention anything about his personal life? Any problems or enemies? Coworker. Not that I know of. But he did have a girlfriend. I think her name was Sarah. Detective Smith. Interesting. Do you know anything else about her? Where we might be able to find her? Coworker. Sorry, I don't know much else. But I think there's someone else who might be able to help you. One of the supervisors, Frank, used to be pretty close with John. They went to high school together or something. The detectives thank the coworker and head over to talk to Frank. Detective Johnson. Frank, we're trying to get a better understanding of John's personal life. Can you tell us anything about him? Frank. Sure, I've known John for years. We used to be good friends. But I haven't talked to him much lately. Detective Smith. Do you know anything about his girlfriend, Sarah? Frank. Yeah, I met her a few times. She seemed nice enough, but I think John was having some problems with her. They had a big fight a few weeks ago. Detective Johnson. Do you know what the fight was about? Frank. Not exactly. But I heard that Sarah might have been cheating on him. The detectives thank Frank for his help and leave the factory, feeling like they've uncovered another possible motive for the murder. They realize that there are still many more pieces to the puzzle, but they're determined to keep investigating until they find the killer. Thanks for watching. We'll back soon with episode 2 #AI #ChatGPT #OpniAI.